Hi, I'm Allie. Join me as I show you how to make these crystal pentagon earrings, which can have so many variations on an odd count of peyote. Once you do the center settings, you can really take it wherever you want to. If you need any supplies, go ahead and look below the video. In the description, we'll put links there back to our website so you can gather them up. Gather up all of your things on your bead on it board and let's get started. So to start out our piece here, we are working with some size 8 dragon thread. You can use size 6 for this as well. I'm working with white and I have about 4 feet. Really what we're concentrating on is creating a nice faux peyote bezel with the addition of some 11-0 seed beads and delicas. I have my delica beads here and my 11-0s, 15, some crystals, and a couple pearls that we'll throw in, and we're working with a 14mm Rivoli. Just like the name, we're going to be doing 5 sets. So to get that kind of star or that pentagram shape, we want to do everything in a grouping of 5. You want to start out on your thread and needles by having one 11-0 seed bead followed by 5 delicas, and repeat that 5 times. After adding to your thread and needle the 5 groups of 5 delicas separated out, we're beginning with an 11-0 seed bead, each one here. We're going to tie this into a knot. So some people will do a stop bead here. I'm using this knot technique because it's the back and because we don't have to go back through this thread again, so the knot is not going to be in the way. I'm going to tie just a simple knot, and then we'll go back and we will tie off our thread there and burn down the thread edges after the fact. So just that simple knot to close up this loop. When you tie the loop and you have that closed knot, you want to make sure that a delica is ending and an 11-0 is next. From here, we're going to take our thread and needle and we are going through the next 11-0 seed bead because that is where we went in and we started. So we stopped with the delica, started with the 11-0, and I'm going to have you go through and sew your needle and thread the whole way through the 5 delicas and through the second 11-0 seed bead, bringing the thread and needle out. We're going to bring the view a little bit closer here so you can see that we're coming out after that 11-0 seed bead. Now, here's what we're going to do a little bit different than what you may be used to. So we are working with an odd count peyote, but we are also going to add some beads on the side. Coming out the 11-0 seed bead, I want you to pick up 2 more 11s, and we're going to circle back through the 11-0 seed bead that's already there, as well as through the first of our delica beads right after that. What that's going to do is sit those 11-0 seed beads almost in a herringbone style, separated at the top and just kind of hanging out and waiting there. Now we're going to add 1 delica, skip over the delica that's already there, and sew through the next delica. So our thread and needle is coming out of delica 1, adding a second delica there by skipping over delica 2, and we sew through 3. Add 1 more delica, skip over 4, sew through 5, and at the same time go ahead and sew through the next 11-0 seed bead. Pull your needle and thread out of there, and now we're going to repeat, adding 2 11s, sewing back and circling around back through that first 11, sewing through the first delica after the 11, and we're establishing this first row of peyote. Add a delica, skip the next delica number 2, and sew through delica 3. Add a delica, skip over delica 4, and sew through 5. At the same time, go ahead and sew through the next 11-0 seed bead there, bringing your thread and needle out and starting that same rotation again. Adding in 2 of your 11s, circling back through that same 11-0 that your thread is currently coming out of, as well as out the first delica, and then add. You're going to do this on all 5 sides. So we have 2 sides done, 3 more to go. After completing your 5th side here and adding in those 2 last delicas, I want you to go through that first 11-0 after the delicas. We're going to go up into that first 11-0 that sits wide open like a herringbone, or if you've done before the hubble stitch, you're going to add 1 more bead and go down through bead number 2. And now we're going to switch the direction which we're going for this stitch. So I'm just going to kind of flip the project in my hand. The needle is where it is. I'm coming out the second bead here of those 2 beads that we set on top of the 11-0. We're going to add 1 of our delica beads, and we're going through the next open delica from our peyote stitch for the row before. So the previous row here, we added a total of 2 beads. This one doing this odd count here, we're adding a bead, going through the next open one, adding a bead, going through the next open one, adding a bead, and then we're going to go up through that 11-0 that's sitting wide and open, starting down towards the bottom and going up through the top to add our 3rd bead into place. So see how that kind of forms that nice line there? You're going to add 1 more of your 11-0 seed beads and go through that 2nd bead of that kind of wide open V herringbone of the 11-0s. On to the next one here then, 3 more delicas get added. Delica gets added on and through the first available delica. And then again, another delica through the next one that's available. So each side has 2 delicas sticking up. We're going to put on 3 more delicas. 1 before, 1 in the middle of those 2, and 1 after. Then when you get to these little herringbone corners, you're going to add 1 more 11-0 seed bead going up through bead number 1, and then coming down through bead number 2. And this just continues the whole way around the piece, adding in those 3 delicas to each side. I have 2 of the sides done, working on the 3rd, and I have 2 more to go. After you add in your delica beads, you're coming out of that first 11-0 seed bead from that herringbone list, and I'm going to have you step up into that point bead that you added on the exterior. That point bead on the exterior, just like we did on the interior, you're going to add 2 more beads to sit wide open that we're going to put a pearl inside of. So 2 more beads get added, 1 and 2, and then you're going to spin back through that center bead. And once again, just like we had it here, that bead sits empty, and you see those 2 beads sitting open like a Y. As we go around the next time, we're going to put a pearl right there in the top. From here, I want you to sew down through the first 11-0 seed bead that's after that middle bead, which is going to be the second one of that original Y, and through the first of the 3 delicas that you added on each side of each row. So going through here, you are going to add your bead, go through your 11-0 seed bead, go through your first of the 3 delicas that are sticking up, add another delica through that center bead number 2 delica. Add a delica, you're going to go through the 3rd delica, up through the 11-0 seed bead that sits right after that delica, up through that point bead that you added on the corners of that 11-0 seed bead, grab 2 more 11-0 seed beads, and into the opposite side of the 11-0 your thread is currently coming out of. Again, getting those 2 beads to sit open like a herringbone stitch on your corners. After here, sew down through the next 11-0 seed bead, through the next 11-0 delica, and continue on with that same pattern. So 2 more delicas get added, 1 and 2 in between the 3 that you've added on the previous row, up through the 11-0 after those delicas, and through that corner bead. Again, 2 more beads get added, 1 and 2, back through the 11-0, and then down and sew into the sides in order to add your 2 more delica beads that will sit. After this, we get to start bending our form towards the interior to hold in and work as a bezel. As we go into the last bead here getting added, that last delica bead, we are going to pull our needle and thread through, and we're going to now ignore the corner pieces and we're going to focus on the interior. I want you to hop over through that middle bead, over towards through the 11-0, through the delica bead there, and I want you to bring your thread and needle so that it comes out through the first of those 2 last delicas that you just added onto the piece. So on each side, we added those 2 delicas that are sticking up. That's where you want your thread and needle to come out of. We're going to come out those 2 delicas, and we're going to add 1 more delica to finish out our peyote in between and come down through the second delica that's already there. When you do so, basically we're right here. We're going to add an additional 4 11-0 seed beads and then connect to the next side. So we're going to add 1 Delica here. We're coming out through the top of that side. We're going to add 1, 2, 3, and 4 11-0 seed beads. Skip in front of our side 11-0 seed beads and sew into the first Delica. Right away you can see, oh, it's starting to create a little bit of a basket. Add a Delica, sew through the next Delica that's sticking up, Delica number 2. There, pull nice and tight. Add 1, 2, 3, 4 11-0 seed beads into side number 3. Add a Delica, go through, next one here, and once again add 1, 2, 3, and 4 of your 11-0 seed beads. As I get to this third time of doing so, I'm going to need to get ready to put my Rivoli in. So your Rivoli is going to kind of sit right in that interior. You can honestly let it just hang out there if you want to, just to give yourself a little cushion or a way to get rid of that extra thread. We're going to tuck it to the back. You can put the crystal in there, or you can wait and put it in on our next go round. I like to put it in there to see my progress. I'm going to add 1 of my Delica beads, sew through the second Delica, and then again add my 4 11-0 seed beads, a couple of which I need to pour more out of. 1, 2, 3, and 4 seed beads. Go over to the last side here through Delica bead number 1. Try not to throw your Rivoli across your table like I just did. And make sure that those outer edge pieces here are sticking to the back. You want all of your seed beads. That's why I like to hold the Rivoli in there to make sure those aren't going to the front, that they're going to the back. Add a Delica, go through the last of your side beads here. And then once again, 3 and 4 of your 11-0s and back into that first bead. When you're coming back into that first bead, you can see that little connection right away. And what this does is it allows you to hold the Rivoli in place if you would sew through this again. We have our 5 spots on the outer edge where we're going to go in and sew a pearl and kind of connect with some crystals. And right now what we're going to do is go to the inner line here and go back and reinforce the sides and add in some 15-0s. So coming out of Delica bead number 1 right there. So you're out of Delica bead number 1 here. I want you to sew through Delica bead number 2, which is the one that you would have just placed onto your threaded needle. Here's where we're going to get our 15-0. So we're going to do kind of one more row of our peyote stitch, adding 1 15-0 seed bead, and then sewing through that grouping of 4 11-0 seed beads. One more Delica bead, sew through that middle, or sorry, 1 15-0, sew through the middle Delica that you just added as you were going around and adding the groups of 4 11-0s also. Add another 15, and then through those 4 11-0 seed beads. The Delicas being naturally smaller, or the 15s being naturally smaller than the Delicas, are going to pull this bezel in towards the interior, creating a nice lock on that 14mm Rivoli. And as I pull and I'm working with a bezel setting here, adding in those 2 15-0s, I'm always pulling almost toward the center of the design. That's just going to make sure you have the tightest effect. And after this go around, we're going to go around one more time. And we are going to add in a single 15-0 seed bead that sits right on top of the Delica that we just sewed through to kind of close it up. So we're going to sew 2 more in right here along this side, and then 1 more on our starting side. Again, going through these 4 along the outer edge. You can add more along the outer edge if you would like to, but it's going to reduce the amount of Rivoli that you see. So one of the tricky things when working with Rivolis is to try to do a bezel where you don't lose sight of the Rivoli, but you make sure that it's nice and tightly kind of concealed into your bezel. That's what this pattern allows you to do. After finishing up here and adding in your last 15-0, go ahead if you can back through the first 15-0, once again through all of those 11-0 seed beads. Right now it's in there, it's not going anywhere. And we're gonna go through our first 15-0 and out. One more trip around the piece through every 5 sides, adding in a 15-0, sewing through the second 15-0, through the next line of 11-0s, and then out after the 15-0 in order to add that point 15. Give a nice tight pull after each one to tighten up to get that center little crown of 15s that sits along that interior row. Once you finish going around and adding your little points of 15s in along the top, we're going to get to the exterior and we're going to start adding on to that 5 points that we've created with our 11-0 seed beads. I want you to come down through, so I'm coming out here through one of my 11-0 seed beads and I'm going to go into my peyote stitch. You want to make sure that your thread and needle follow the stitch line here so you don't see any and that you're not pulling back on the bezel. And you're just going right along the stitch line, making sure you're going from bead to bead carefully and then up to get into that corner. To get into that corner, I'm coming out the Delica bead right next to the 11-0. Then I'm going to go into the 11-0 seed bead, wiggle in there, circle around into the 11-0 that's there at the top. And then we're going to go right into our 11-0 of almost that herringbone section. So your threaded needle is now coming out of that top section and see how it's spread out, that the beads are sitting with the holes kind of almost vertical. You're going to plop a pearl in the middle there. Now you're going to say, oh no, you are totally going to see a lot of thread. You will see thread, they're white. And then as we add our last row of seed beads, the addition of that helps to separate them and to make it so that the hole lines up in the middle. So you're going to be coming out of that bead number 1, add a pearl, and go down through bead number 2. When you're out bead number 2 here, anything can happen. You can do anything that you would like. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 of my little 2mm crystals after the 3mm pearl. And then I'm going to go up into my bead that sits next in that herringbone section. Bugles would look great here. Tubelets would look great. You could do an additional row of seed beads. I just wanted that pop of purple on that exterior. Add your next pearl, and that's a 3mm pearl, and then go down through the second bead on that corner. Remember how I said you're going to see a little bit of thread there. Don't worry about it if the hole is not facing lateral and it's facing vertical. Don't worry about it. We'll correct that with our last pass on the exterior. 4 more beads go on. And then again into bead number 1 and out. Add your pearl. Come down bead number 2 and then your 4 seed beads. Go the whole way around, finishing up your sides on this. And as you finish up, you're going to go back up through bead number 1 over here and go through the pearl and wait there for us to go in and to put 12 of our 15-0 seed beads along the outer edge and face the pearl. But I want to show you exactly what it's going to look like without that outer edge of gold 15s in case you want to stop there. Also just showing you here, you could have some fun with some color play, bigger beads here, or even swap in at the bottom here for a different look, some different pearls to go in and have it be a different style. Still with that same base, with that pentagon, and going in with that odd count peyote, but you can get creative when you get to this point in the project. After coming out through the pearl on the outer edge, again, you can do tons of modifications if you want to. You're going to go into the next pearl at the next corner. And here's where I said, don't worry if the holes don't fit or they don't sit so straight, because we're going to add 12 seed beads to our thread and needle and then sew through the next pearl on the outer edge and just create that nice line of linking. You can also, if you want to, go down and go around the outer edge of the pearl and really make it kind of intense. You could add another pearl here. So if you wanted to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 beads, then another one of your crystals, then another one of your pearls. This one would be an 8mm pearl. You could have it that it goes down to a purple 11, come back up through. So this is just to show variation on that interior line. Back up through here. You can change out the outer edge for pretty much anything. Coming out through here then, repeat those 6 seed beads, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then into the next pearl. So you can really make this design whatever you want to. If you want that pearl to hang down, if you want it to go straight across, it's up to you. What do you want the look and feel of the project to be? Go ahead, 12-15s will go on the outer edge. You could do 11-0 seed beads if you want to get more of that purple color around the outer edge as well. And then we'll come back up to the top here and add a wire guard on. So recording this live on Twitch, we actually decided to change out the pearl for a bigger crystal. We thought if you want to make a matching necklace, how cool would that crystal look on the bottom, one of the water drop ones? Really supportive of that bottom crystal there that you could be coming off of. And we're going to use a smaller crystal on the top here just to add a little bit of oomph. Again, you can go in and you can do seed beads the whole way around. 12 is your number. Here I did the 12 and still the pearl coming down. And one thing I want you to do is reinforce this outer line or this last line. Also, when you add things, you just want to make sure that it's not curving and that you're not having any pressure along the lines. So if you need to, and it's curving or it's pulling in, add another little seed bead. Or if it's really gappy, take a seed bead away. But go ahead around the outer line here of your beads, reinforcing, and then we're going to bring our needle and thread up to the top. When I get to the bottom here, I'm going to sew directly right through the line if you want to, or drop down into the piece. Either way works. And then I'll meet you back on the top for us to add a wire guard to put on to our ear wire. Our final step is to add our wire guard to the top of our earring. Now, when it comes to wire guards, I prefer to use them because you don't want to put your thread directly onto your ear wire or onto your huggy. And this gives it a very professional look, especially because this has a very formal or regal look to it. After coming out our top pearl, which sits directly across from our crystal, or if you want to keep it plain, the one just right there at the top, you can also put it on an offside and hang the crystal down from there if you want to. I'll show you that look here. You can do that. You're going to want to add a wire guard somewhere on the piece. I'm out the pearl. I'm going to add a 15 and my 11 to get some of that purple color on the top. And I've gone through the first side of the wire guard. The wire guard is a U-shaped channel that if you're right here or right here on the U-shaped channel, it's actually almost a tube. It's not a soldered tube, so sometimes be careful if you try to stretch them open too much. And then on the exterior edge, it sits almost like a little channel. Your thread is going to sit trapped inside that channel, which is going to prevent it from rubbing on the ear wire, and again, just give it a nice professional look. After coming down that second side of that U channel, go ahead and put on your 11 and your 15-0 seed bead and go back through that pearl, circling around the pearl because you want it to sit even on top of the design. Anytime you have a clasp, a closure, a wire guard, always, always, always take another strand of thread through there to reinforce along that outer edge. Down through the opposite side as well. If you can, down through the seed beads right away, but sometimes you have to separate them out a little bit. After this, the last thing to do is to get your needle and thread back to the back of the design to that initial peyote stitch on the center here and tie off your thread and needle. I like to tie the two together because then I don't have to worry too much about where my thread end is. It's on the back. I'm going to go back through the pearl to finish out looping around through my wire guard. I'm going to go down through the 11-0 after the pearl. I'm going to go down through the 11-0 that sits to the bottom there. Down along the 11-0s that sit to the back, and so on and so forth. So I'm just sewing my needle and thread the whole way back till I get those two thread ends next to one another, making sure my thread is not going to be shown going through an area that doesn't already have a thread pass connecting from this bead to that bead. So when you're getting rid of thread, you're going to say, hey, out of this bead that my thread is currently coming out of, where else did that thread go? And what other beads did that connect to? Find them, sew through them. Sometimes with this size 10 needle and the thicker thread, you're going to have to wiggle. But there I go, right down that line. thread ends then, get it the whole way next to one another, coming along the whole exterior of the back. Tie them off, grab your thread burner, burn them down, and finish off your earring. After you burn those thread ends to the back, you're just going to take your ear wire if you want to. You could take a huggy earring, open up your loop, and hang it from there since it's a nice substantial one. Or go in and open up your ear wire by pushing to the side. Put your wire guard on and close up your wire guard. With an earring like this, where it takes a little bit longer time-wise to make, I would suggest using a rubber back or even a lever back because you don't want to lose this one, especially if you're going to a fancy event and you might be dancing. Thanks so much for joining me for these crystal pentagon earrings. They were really fun to create and see the different variations and really work through the Twitch crowd and community for the drop design. As always, if you need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the little description there. We put links to get back to our website. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you subscribe here so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. Also head on over to Twitch as well, where you can watch things like these earrings being designed and recorded. Thanks so much for watching and stay tuned for more inspirational designs.